Strange Figment presents.
In early 2019, a kid-friendly YouTube channel quickly gained popularity. The channel, Silly Spotty's Playground, posted short episodes featuring Spotty the Dalmatian, each no more than 5 to 10 minutes long. They were pretty much what you would expect from videos targeting young kids. Spotty spent his time with friends, Alice Owl and Peter Porcupine, and learned about something new in each episode. Sometimes it was basic things, like learning about numbers and letters. Other times, they were about things that were a bit more tricky to teach small kids about, like being a true friend or how to be a good little boy or girl. They featured all the things that would keep a kid's attention. Bright colors, catchy music, and fun songs. They also sometimes had guests on the show. Adults that would help teach Spotty and his friends the important lesson for the video. Each episode always ended the same way. The screen would fade to black, and Spotty would come out walking in from one side, go to the middle of the screen and sit down. He'd bark 3 times, pant once, and then, in his high-pitched voice, tell the viewer that he hoped they had had fun, and that fun is important too. He'd finished with, "Don't forget to find the fun in everything," before turning and running off the screen. The closing music would run for a second with an image of Spotty, Alice, and Peter sitting together smiling and laughing. In late 2019, people began to notice that the lessons that Spotty and his friends were learning started to change a bit. Some people just attributed it to the fact that the target audience was growing up and needed some more mature advice. But others worried that some of them would give kids the wrong ideas and weren't teaching the right lesson. For example, in December of 2019, a video titled "Spotty Learns About Fire" showed up on the channel. In this episode, Spotty was looking for a special toy of his, a small ratty-looking bunny he calls Bun Bun, all over the house. He looks in drawers, under the couch, even in the shower without much luck. He even turns and asks the viewer where he should look next, waiting as if he's expecting an answer. After a pause, he shouts, "Oh yeah, I didn't even think about checking in the garage." He quickly bounds off to the garage that's empty except for a few boxes in the corner. Spotty leaps over to the boxes, pokes his nose inside, but instead of coming out with Bun Bun, he pulls out a lighter. It was the long kind usually used for lighting candles and keeping your hands safe from the flame at the end. He admired the lighter, running his finger along the black end, starting from the handle and moving out towards where the flame would come out. He seemed hypnotized by the thing and didn't speak for a full 30 seconds. When he snapped out of it, he turned back to the viewer and said, "Do you know what this is?" and held it up. "It's a magic stick. I bet you have a magic stick somewhere in your house, too. This isn't like a stick you would find out in the yard and play with, though. We have to be very careful with this kind of stick because it can hurt people and things." He admired it again and pushed hard on the button that would trigger the spark and ignite the fuel inside. It took him a few tries, but the flame finally jumped out at the end, reflecting in Spotty's oversized eyes. The flame danced in front of him, exaggerated for comedic effect, of course. Spotty stared at it for a few more seconds before releasing the button. Then Peter popped out from the boxes shouting, "I found him!" and holding up Bun Bun proudly. Spotty cheered and took Bun Bun, giving it a big hug and a lick, clearly happy to have it back. The scene shifted, and Peter and Spotty were now back inside, sitting in front of the fireplace in the main room. Spotty smiled at the camera and waved the lighter in the air. "Remember, kids," he started in that same high sing-song voice, "you have to be careful with these magic sticks. They can hurt someone if you're not careful." And with that, he grabbed Peter's arm, lit the lighter, and held Peter's hand over the flame. Spotty smiled a little. After a moment, Peter cried and Spotty let go. The scene zoomed in on Spotty, his large eyes looking directly at the viewer. "See, kids? These sticks can be dangerous if you're not careful. You have to be very careful when you use one and try not to hurt anyone. Spotty stared at the viewer for a moment longer, and then the scene went black. The familiar end music started up, Spotty bounded back on and off the screen, and the episode finished. As soon as the episode was posted, YouTube received numerous complaints about it, mostly from concerned parents. The YouTube team investigated the video and ultimately found that there was no terms of service violation. Naturally, this was met with anger from those who had reported the video, leading to petitions and social media campaigns trying to get Spotty taken down. In the end, though, it was ruled that Spotty could stay. After that, Silly Spotty's Playground channel seemed to take a break. People wondered if all the unwanted attention made the creator reconsider their choice to make this series and possibly not return. Days stretched to weeks, and still no updates. The videos that were up, however, were constantly hitting new highs in views. All of the media attention brought in a whole new group of viewers, and more kids were learning all about Spotty and his pals every day. Except the newer videos, the ones with questionable advice. Then, just as suddenly as it had stopped, Spotty's channel began to upload new videos again. Besides learning about the dangers of fire, in other recent uploads, Spotty learned about the dangers of lying, taking medicine without parents to help, and playing with sharp things like knives. No matter how many complaints YouTube received about these episodes, they refused to remove them. A few smaller media outlets covered the story, but the general public quickly lost interest. And Silly Spotty's Playground became just another kids' series on YouTube. That is, until March 2020. On March 3rd, a new video was uploaded to the channel. It wasn't a new episode covering the latest adventures of Spotty, though. The video started with a black screen. It was completely silent, save for the occasional grunting noise and the sound of distant laughter. The video ended after 10 minutes, but the second before it finished, it flashed an image of a piece of white poster board with the words, "Just Watch," hastily written on it. Then, on March 24th, the channel went live. Subscribers were notified immediately, and the live viewers flooded into the stream. At first, the video was completely black, the only sound being some distant, ragged breathing and muffled groans. Word spread quickly through social media, and the number of viewers had tripled before long, watching and waiting for whatever this was. After a few long minutes, whoever was on the other end removed whatever was blocking the camera. It was a room, dimly lit from a single lamp in a far corner sitting on the floor. Not just any room, though. It was Spotty's living room. Every detail was exactly the same as the show. There was the fireplace that Spotty and his friends sat in front of, the chair where the adults sometimes sat when teaching Spotty the lesson for the episode, and Spotty's small dog bed complete with matching water bowl. The only light source, that single lamp on a box, was only barely bright enough to be able to make out the details, but it was clearly modeled after Spotty's house. The walls were covered with images of Spotty and his friends. Promotional posters that were sold at a limited time only event, printouts of screenshots from the episodes, and even what looked like a child's drawings of characters of the show. After what seemed like an eternity, the silence was broken by a loud thump, a groan, and a laugh. The laugh is unmistakable. It's Spotty. In the context of the show, the high-pitched giggle made sense coming out of a cartoon dog, but now it was just unnerving, to say the least. The view count for the broadcast began to soar as more and more people found out about it. One report estimates that at the highest point, over 1 million people were tuned in. After a few more minutes of excruciating silence, the camera began to move. Whoever it was picked it up and panned to the right to a previously unseen wall. It was covered with Polaroid photographs, neatly pinned in rows. Those that went back to review the video later estimated there were around 100, but the shadows in the room made it hard to be sure. In the dim light, it was difficult to make out what they were pictures of, though. As the camera grew closer, you could make out the scrawled handwriting below each of the photos. It was words like knives, liar, and fire. The camera continued to advance, moving closer to zoom in on one of the photos in the first row with the word knives underneath it. In the photo, a man was lying on the ground, surrounded by a pool of dark liquid that only could have been blood. He had been blindfolded, his arms and legs were bound, and he had been stripped down to nothing but his underwear. The camera stopped moving and zoomed in on the man's completely shaven head. The word knives had been carved into the top of his head. The cuts were so deep that the edges of his scalp were pulling away from his skull in the places where the letters were close together. The unseen person giggled again, and in a high-pitched voice that sounded close to, if not exactly like Spotty's, said happily, "See, kids? I told you playing with knives was dangerous." The camera zooms back out and begins to walk past the row of photos, stopping only briefly at a select few along the way. One photo showed badly charred human remains with the word fire underneath. Another read helmet and showed what looked like a man with a dented-in skull. As the camera moved along the images, each seemed to be worse than the last. Finally, the camera hit the end of its gory parade of photos and moved back towards the living room scene. The angle was different, so you could see more of the room. And there, in the center of the room, was a man kneeling over what looked like shards of glass glinting in the dim light. Much like the others, he had been stripped down and blindfolded. His wrists and ankles were bound and tied together to prevent escape. "Now, kids," the high voice came again, "remember how I told you that drugs were bad? Well, our friend here is going to help show us why." The figure set the camera down and adjusted it so that the kneeling man was in the center of the frame. A figure stepped out from behind the camera, a heavy-set man wearing only shorts and tennis shoes, and a mask. A Spotty mask. He waved to the camera and did a little dance. In his hand was a large syringe filled with a white substance. The man in the Spotty mask then made a show out of injecting the substance into the man's arm, directly into the vein at the elbow. The man in the mask patted the bound man on the head and stepped back into the shadows. Minutes pass, and no sound can be heard on the recording except the bound man's ragged breathing and a small voice chanting, "Let's have fun, let's have fun," over and over. Then the bound man begins to violently convulse. The glass under his knees crunches loudly as his body falls over, thrashing violently on the floor against his restraints. He screams in agony as every muscle in his body tightens and his head smashes hard against the cold concrete floor. It lasts for what seems like an eternity before the man finally goes limp. As the bound man releases his last breath, the man in the mask steps back out into the scene. "Wasn't that fun, kids? I think our friend had a great time, but next time he should be more safe." The man in the mask grabs a Polaroid camera from off to one side and, after placing the syringe next to the bound man on the floor, takes a photo, the flash briefly illuminating the entire room. Shaking the photo, he looks back into the camera, cocks his head to one side, and pulls a black marker out of his pocket, writing on the bottom of the photo. He drops the photo down onto the still warm corpse of the bound man and advances on the camera. He reaches behind it and comes back with a crude cardboard sign that reads, "Have fun and be safe, or you'll be next." He waves at the audience, and he's still waving when the feed goes black and the broadcast ends.